Hey everyone, this is Nordic Brit. So the past few weeks I've been concerned about a specific topic regarding the laws and pandemic regulations that have been passed during the coronavirus and the pandemic over the last couple of years. And one thing that's kind of concerned me about this is that a lot of regulations have been passed, a lot of new laws have been passed. And my question really is, are those things going to be reversed when this is over? Do the governments who have passed these changes, have they expressed a will to turn this back, to alter the laws again to pre-pandemic times? Of course, if there were some really good lessons learned and those new laws are actually better, then of course we can keep them. However, that needs to be very transparent. We need to know and look at all the laws that were passed in your respective countries and look at what was passed during the pandemic and then what was reversed after it. Now, the pandemic isn't over yet. Scientists and people way cleverer than I am are working super hard to create vaccines, to get the rollouts done and stuff like that. But once that's over, we really need to hold the politicians and the governments in our respective countries to account. Because if they've passed regulations, which many countries have, if they've passed new laws, which many countries have, and they do not undo those, then ulterior motives become really clear about those laws. And we need to ask ourselves a very important question. What have we lost? We're not just talking about the deaths of our family and our friends. We're not talking about the illnesses that will affect some people for years to come. We're not talking about job losses, and we're not talking about GDP and figures like that. We're talking about what have we lost in terms of our civil and individual and societal liberties that we had before the pandemic and after. It's not new to anyone that the fight over privacy and information in the last few years has become much more heated and much more important because of private companies and because of governments. But there's been a huge fight around this kind of stuff, and under the pandemic regulations, there's been several governments in the world that have used this to accelerate their surveillance systems, to accelerate various laws on following people online and information control and stuff like that. And of course, a lot of companies have moved in to try to do as much as they can during this kind of crazy time. And we as people have to absolutely fight against that type of thing. It needs to be done in a public way. It needs to be transparent. It needs to be done in a public forum. But I'm concerned that a lot of these regulations won't be undone. In Sweden, we passed a new constitution, at least an amendment to the constitution in Sweden, that gave the government the authority to close down restaurants and give the agencies more power and stuff around that. This is not unusual. A few countries also had this, but the Swedish government did not have the authority and the mechanisms in place within the law to do that, given the circumstances. So they had to amend it. Now, they have expressed some information about this, that this is not a permanent thing, it's a temporary thing. So we will hold them to account to that here. But, other countries, the US, the UK, Poland, Hungary, I've been following those developments in those countries. There's a lot of regulation passed, and you have to be careful about which regulation you're looking at, because it could just say, pandemic regulation. You think, well, that's just to do with the pandemic, but there'll be some communications directives in there, some economic directives in there that have nothing to do with that. That's very common in a lot of countries to basically combine regulation like that, because otherwise they'll never get it passed by itself, which says a lot. So, some countries like China pass some really crazy, mental, dystopian surveillance laws and really ramped up their program of surveillance. They're definitely not getting that freedom back. And, I believe in information privacy. I believe in internet privacy and security. I don't think that you can have it 100%, but I believe that there needs to be a proper process of asking for it, that we should be people should be educated and know what they're sharing and what's being tracked and stuff like that, if we're going to have any say in kind of keeping the internet and the information around our lives democratic and open. So, we have to be careful with that. I think that I would really love that everyone in every country basically just look at their laws. Perhaps we can get some kind of ball rolling. I would really love that on basically following up with this topic, maybe getting some people in to talk about that, maybe sending in some information to me with respect to your country and say that this law was passed, or this is a regulation that was passed and this is what it was like before, and perhaps we can get a bit more of a public ball rolling on this so that we can actually start to hold politicians in respective countries to account, to hold the governments to account. Otherwise, what we're doing is we've lost so much if we don't. We're basically giving the political and the corporate and elite of the world more power, and they did that under the guise of protection, which is really bad. That's not going to be a new thing, that's happened before, but we have the power of social media and other activities that we can do to make sure that we hold them to account. We have elections next year in Sweden, so that will be one of my primary concerns. If the parties in power do not commit to reversing certain authorities that they've granted themselves, then you can count them out, regardless of anything else they do. This is about morals. It's about deep-rooted morals and ethics that need to be held strongly firm and never falter, because if you lose those things, you're basically saying it's okay for them to run over your laws and regulations and your privacy, and that concerns me a lot. So make sure you keep an eye on what's going on in your country. Feel free to send me some information, feel free to send me links or write in the comments below, and I will look at it, and maybe in a few weeks or months we can put something together about this. Perhaps just start messaging on Twitter or your friends and family and say, hey, what have we lost? And we're going to get this back, because we've already lost enough. And we don't want to come out of this pandemic with less civil liberties, less individual liberties, less societal freedoms than we started with. So I hope everyone's safe. Please do keep an eye on this. Please do keep an eye on social distancing, wear a mask and all that kind of jazz. Well, this has been Nordic Brit, so I'll see you in the next video.